and to be aware of the recent developments in vaccines. So we'll cover some of these principles listed here, principles about the immunologic system and how that designs the immunisation schedule, what the current schedule is, some of the recent changes, and a bit about some of the new vaccines and adverse events. So the first area is immunologic principles. This is the schedule, and you may wonder, well, why do we give vaccines at 6 weeks, 4 months, 6 months, 1 month, 3 months, 5 months, 15 months? Why do we design it this way? And a little bit of this is based around the immune system and how the age of the infant determines the response to the vaccines, and also the burden of disease in our community. As shown here, the vaccine schedule in Australia commences at birth with the hepatitis B vaccine, and then children get vaccines, multivalent vaccines at 6 weeks, 4 months, 6 months, and then booster doses later in life. There have been some recent schedule changes. From July of last year, our national program changed to 12 months. So we added a meningococcal ACWY vaccine, and the brand that we use is called Nymenrix. And the pneumococcal vaccine, which was given at 6 months, moved out to 12 months of age. So babies now get pneumococcal vaccine, Prevnar 13 vaccine at 2 months, 4 months, and 12 months. The Hib vaccine, which we formerly gave at 12 months, has now moved out to 18 months. So children now at get 3 vaccines at 12 months and 3 vaccines at 18 months. And in some cases, such as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, they actually get a 4th dose, which is the hepatitis A vaccine. This is the NCR's website, and this is the fact sheet, which describes in more detail the age and the antigen that you get, the age at which you get the different vaccine antigens. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the 4 main factors that come into determining the schedule are the type of vaccine, the influence of mother's antibody, how mature your immune system is, and the disease incidence and prevalence. So the first point is the different types of the vaccines. In basic principles, there are live and non-live vaccines. The thing about the live vaccines is that they contain many different antigens, and this particular organism multiplies and mimics natural infection, so stimulates both B and the T cell arm of the immune system. An example of a live vaccine is the MMR vaccine, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, or the chickenpox vaccine. A non-live vaccine contains fewer antigens and uses mainly the B cell part of the immune system rather than the T cell. And the example of this is the acellular pertussis vaccine, which contains diphtheria, tetanus, and acellular pertussis. The pertussis bit is just 3 or 5 different antigens from the whooping cough bug, rather than the whole cell vaccine, which we used to use in the late 1990s. Mother's antibodies can cross the placenta, and they can interfere with the response to the infant vaccine. A good example of this is shown by this measles antibody. So in this particular graph, what we're showing you is the percentage where it's positive for measles antibody on this axis here, and the age. And so we took blood on this particular study. The authors took blood from infants at these different ages and measured for measles antibody. And as you can see here, in the under 3-month-olds, nearly 100% of babies had measles antibody detected. The reason for this was that mum had passively transferred across the placenta antibody, measles antibody, to the baby, so the baby started life with a good amount of antibody. Out here at 12 months of age, it was less than 10%, so the antibody had slowly decayed with time. This is showing a graph showing the response to the vaccines according to different ages. The percentage seroconversion is similar to the percent that respond. And this is the age at which they got vaccinated. And what you can see here is that there's less of a response at 9 to 11 months compared to 15 to 17 months. And the reason for this is that mother's antibody is interfering with the vaccine given to the baby. So therefore, in our schedule, we give the vaccine, measles, first dose of the measles-containing vaccine at 12 months of age. In other parts of the world, where measles is much more of a problem, they actually give it at 9 months. And in some countries, when there's an epidemic, they actually go down to 6 months of age. The next factor that influences the immune system and the timing of the vaccines is the antibody response and the T cell responses. Okay. We can enhance the responses to the vaccines by giving repeated doses, for example, a 6-week, 4-month, 6-month dose. by adding adjuvants to the vaccines. And the classic adjuvant which is added to many of the inactivated or non-live vaccines is aluminium. The aluminium sort of acts like a central hub of a wheel, and off that hub we can hang the spoke, and on the end of the spokes are the different antigens. So, for example, the Infanrix Hexa vaccine, which has 6 antigens in it, has a central aluminium core, and hanging off that is diphtheria, tetanus, whooping cough, hepatitis B, Hib, and polio. And the idea of the aluminium is to stimulate the immune response because it's a foreign material. Immune cells go to the site of injection, see the diphtheria antigen, and then make diphtheria antibody. And the other way we can improve the immune system is by conjugation. An example of conjugated vaccines are the pneumococcal and the Hib vaccine. An important part of this scheduling is the spacing of the doses. We don't want to give the doses too close together because there's insufficient time for memory cells. But at the same time, we don't want to have it too wide. In general, the minimum gap between vaccines is about 1 month. However, if you do get, for example, a 6-week dose, a 4-month dose, and then you have a 6-month gap before the next dose, you don't need to repeat that dose. And we do use booster doses. For example, the DTP vaccine, we give a primary course of 2, 4, 6 months, then we give an 18-month and then a 4-year boost, and then we give another boost in adolescence, and then another boost in the adult, and when you're an adult and you're in the childbearing years. As I mentioned before, this is the action of the aluminium. I won't go through this in detail, but you can have a look at this. And the main concept is that the aluminium is designed to provoke a good immune response and therefore get a better antibody response. These are the examples of the conjugate vaccines on the left here. The Hib, meningococcal C vaccine, the Prevnar vaccine, they work very well under the age of 2, and they promote the production of what we call high avidity antibodies, which mean they're antibodies which are well directed towards that antigen. And importantly, they give you an immune memory. And that's important because we give the meningococcal C vaccine or the meningococcal ACWY vaccine to our infants at the age of 1, and that's it for their life. So there's immune memory set up. The polysaccharide vaccine, Menstavax, is no longer really used because it's been replaced by the ACWY vaccine. And the Pneumovax vaccine, which has 23 different pneumococcal antigens, is principally used in children with high-risk medical conditions. They don't work very well under the age of 2. They do get repeated doses, and there's a potential for immune tolerance, meaning that with repeated doses, you don't get such a good response. The fourth factor influencing the timing of the schedule is the disease burden in our community. So this is showing the hospitalizations, and as you can see here, most of them have occurred before the age of 12 weeks, and less out here. And so in our community, the timing of the most important timing is to protect the very young infants. So we start the schedule at 6 weeks, 4 months and 6 months. And in actual fact, we now start the schedule for the babies before they're born by asking pregnant women to have a whooping cough vaccine. And that's using the same principle as the transfer of mother's antibody. The babies start life with a good amount of whooping cough antibody and therefore protect them in that first 2 to 3 months of life. So they're the 4 main factors that influence the timing of the immune schedule. In terms of our immunisation system, we now have the Australian Immunisation Register, and that's a very useful resource in Australia to understand who is vaccinated. And importantly, the register now links receipt of vaccines to government programs such as No Jab, No Pay, where if you're not vaccinated, you're not able to receive some family tax benefit payments. So the register has been around now for a long time, originally established by the Commonwealth Government. It records the vaccines that are given to everyone, and it's now able to, for many years now, GPs have been able to enter that data onto their practice software, and it can be transmitted directly to the immunisation register. They can also generate history statements, which can be requested by the parents and or providers as well. So in terms of coverage, we're doing pretty well. 94% coverage at the age of 12 months, a little bit lower at the age of 2 years. We'll never get to 100% because there will always be those that are under-immunised, and that includes disadvantaged families that just can't get to the GP on time to get the vaccine. Those that are highly educated and sceptical about vaccines, and want to cherry pick different vaccines, and then the conscientious objectors who really don't want to get any vaccines at all. This is the schedule for adolescents and adults. In the adolescent period, you do get a varicella, a whooping cough booster, and a human papillomavirus vaccine. As you get older, you can see you get boosters of DTP, and then beyond the age of 65, things like the annual influenza vaccine, and this is the 23-valent pneumococcal polysaccharide vaccine. And over the age of 70, November of 2016, the elderly have been able to get the zoster vaccine. Importantly, as I mentioned, the pregnant women are recommended to get the DTPA and the flu vaccine, and that's designed to not only protect that woman from the whooping cough and flu during the pregnancy, but for the baby to get some early infant protection through maternal transfer of mainly whooping cough and flu antibodies. So I just got a little bit more detail into whooping cough, a nasty disease. I showed you a similar graph before, with most of the disease occurring in the very first 3 months of life. This is the schedule. As you can see here, a primary series, then a booster dose, and then an adolescent booster dose. If the primary course has been interrupted, then you don't need to restart again. You just resume where they've taken off. Adolescents do get their booster dose, which is now in many states in in Australia, done through school-based campaigns. Importantly, that healthcare workers and all childcare workers should get a whooping cough vaccine, and pregnant women are recommended to get that vaccine somewhere between 28 to 32 weeks gestation, although this age gestation recommendation is likely to be widened, and it may go down to 20 weeks gestation. Why do we immunise pregnant women? Well, this is the graph which shows you here. In maternal immunisation, on this little graph here, you can see that mum got the vaccine. She made antibody here. That's mum's antibody. It actually crosses to the baby, and therefore the baby can start life with the antibody, and so it's protected. It's designed really to protect that infant in that first few months of life, and we know that it's quite effective. So some studies in England and the US where they've been doing this, and this is a nice study published in Clinical Infectious Diseases, which shows that the vaccine effectiveness against hospitalisation for infants under the age of 8 weeks was about 90 to 93%. So it's a highly efficacious vaccine to stop the very young infants getting whooping cough. So that's the whooping cough schedule. In terms of another cherry-picking other diseases, the meningococcal vaccine. This is notifications of meningococcal disease. That's what IMD stands for, invasive meningococcal disease. In Australia, if you do have a lab test and we find meningococcal in your bacteria, in your blood or your CSF, then that goes on to be typed, and we can work out whether it's type B, type C, type W, or untyped, etc. And they're all counted by our notification system. So going back for many years now, we've had a fairly good record of the burden of invasive disease. And you can see here, this is all notifications have declined over time. In 2003, the meningococcal C vaccine was introduced, and you can see here in the green line, meningococcal C disease has pretty much disappeared. But just in the last little few years, the burden of meningococcal disease has started to climb, and that's mainly been driven by two types, the type W and the type Y going up here. Type B disease, which is this one here, has always remained steady but slowly trickled down as well. So now type C is pretty much gone. Most the disease is in the under 12 months, and then a little spike here in the adolescents. So the two important groups to receive meningococcal vaccines are the 12-month-olds and the 15 to 19-year-olds. These guys are getting it through the school program, and these guys are now getting a meningococcal ACWY vaccine at 12 months of age. So healthy kids, 1 dose of meningococcal ACWY update you here, are showing pneumococcal, HPV, flu, and zoster. So we've been thinking for a little while, is the 3+0 schedule, which is a dose of pneumococcal vaccine at 6 weeks, 4 months, and 6 months, is that the best schedule? Many countries around the world don't use such a schedule. They use what's known as a 2+1 schedule. So that's 2 doses in infants and then a booster dose in the second year of life. In Australia, we originally started with a 7-valent pneumococcal vaccine in 2005, and in 2011 we switched to a 13-valent. So that's the Australian schedule, a 2-month, 4-month, 6-month schedule. As you can see here, the UK uses 2 doses here and then a +1 dose here, and the US uses 3 doses +1. So where there's a difference is that Australia doesn't give a booster at this 12-month mark. We've been monitoring pneumococcal disease, a little bit like